Hawaii and our island for showing up and doing the right thing. And so being here this evening really means a lot to us, but I think it also means a lot to our senator to know that we're really concerned, paying attention, and care. So thank you for being here. My kuleana is really actually to talk about the senator's kuleana, so that you actually know the reach and depth that he has. He is our senior United States Senator, representing Hawaii since 2012. Senator Schatz serves as Vice Chair of the Indian Affairs Committee and ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations. He also sits on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, and the Select Committee on Ethics. Imagine that. He also serves with the Senate Democratic Leadership Team as Chief Deputy Whip and Deputy Conference Secretary. It's all yours, Senator. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you to my dear friend Patty and everybody who's put this event together. It is a pleasure to be here and to see a fair amount of familiar faces, but also some new friends. I want to introduce my staff. In the back, we have Malia Paul, my Deputy Chief of Staff. Dale Hahn, my Senior Policy Advisor. And Mike Inakai, my Communications Director. So we have a lot of senior staff here, and I'll just say a couple things about how I want to structure this. First, I want it to be Q&A and not me giving remarks, because frankly, it's more interesting for you and easier for me if I'm responding to questions rather than trying to deliver a long speech. Second, I will try to, against all of my learned 13 years in the Senate, be brief. I'll try to give you, if you give me a fast question, I'll try to give you an answer in 1 to 2 minutes rather than the 5 minutes that I'm always allocated when I'm on a committee. And then the other thing I would say is that we're probably not we may not get to everybody's questions. If you reduce them to writing, we promise to get back to you in writing so that nobody feels sort of ripped off by not having their opportunity. So let me just do it this way. I have federal funding update, opportunities for bipartisanship, and then I have challenges, and then we go to questions. So on the federal fund side, there are really 2 ways to look at how we are doing. And the first is the kind of most obvious way, which is that there are programs and projects that matter very much to all of us that are being cut. Some of them are being illegally cut, and some of them, frankly, the administration has the authority to withdraw funding because most grant agreements have a provision in them that allows the federal government to cancel for convenience, which basically is a catch-all for if the government wants to cancel a grant contract, they can. So we have to fight these different sort of freezing, canceling, and all the rest of it in different ways. Sometimes when it's actually canceled, but they have authorization to do so, there's not a ton we can do. There's a lot of illegal cancellations, and then we work with people who are litigating and trying to get those funds released, and we've been pretty successful. There's another category, for instance, Hilo Bayfront safety improvements, Waimea Bridge improvements, which have been frozen, but we anticipate them eventually being released. 75 million of the frozen funding has already been released for Hawaii Island. So every day we walk those categories, and every day my staff keeps a spreadsheet of all federal funding coming in by county, by state house district, and then across the state of Hawaii. The cuts are acute, and I don't want anybody to think I'm dismissive of how acute they are, and how much we are tracking individual projects and programs and trying to get people their money. But the other way to look at this is that, by and large, if you're looking macroeconomically, we're talking more than 95% of all federal funding continuing to flow to the state of Hawaii. So it's very bad in the research space. It's very bad in the climate space. In other parts of our community and parts of our economy, it's not quite as bad. We've been doing pretty well on earmarks over the last couple of years. I can't guarantee that will continue, but for Hawaii Island generally and the Waimea, Kohala, and Kona communities, we've done pretty well, both on the transportation side and especially in terms of the healthcare, because we know how challenging it is to move over to opportunities to work together, because I think if you either get your phone through your iPhone, if you get your news through the iPhone or cable news, you would assume that there are no opportunities for bipartisanship, and that's not actually true. I want to give you two examples. I could give you a dozen, but I want to give you two that I care about and should provide you a little bit of hope. 10 years ago, one of my staffers came to me and pitched me on being like the telehealth person in the United States Senate. And like a lot of people back then, I kind of didn't know exactly what it meant, except that, kind of intuitively, you go into a room, they have a camera, blah, blah, blah. And I frankly wasn't bought in. But after a year, I started to realize how transformational this was going to be for healthcare. And now we've really gone from a position where if you were told to interact with your doctor via telehealth like 12 years ago, you would have been irritated and considered that bad customer service. Now, if you can't do that, you may be irritated and consider that bad customer service. And part of that is the general transformation of Internet of Things and all the connectivity and all the cool stuff that especially helps rural communities, but it was also COVID, where the transformation just accelerated massively. There are still tremendous opportunities in remote patient monitoring, all kinds of cool stuff, like, dermatology appointments where you go in and someone examines your body and you have to, drive to a hospital, sit there, wait until your name is called. At some point, you're just gonna be able to take a snapshot of it, upload it to your app, and they'll tell you whether or not you have to come in. That's just a very simple example. Wearing a device that monitors your vitals gets you better continuous data, but also prevents you from having to drive in for care, especially if you're too medically fragile to actually do your own transportation for medical appointments. So telehealth is tremendous in terms of its high potential. It's probably, besides mental health, the only place where Democrats and Republicans have been working together since the Affordable Care Act has been enacted. The other place is housing. Senator Tim Scott is a very conservative guy from South Carolina, and he and Elizabeth Warren worked together on a bipartisan housing package that got a unanimous vote out of the Banking and Housing Committee like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I just want to make the case for housing locally. I come from the progressive movement, and I come from the environmental movement in the state of Hawaii. I started with the Save Sandy Beach Coalition, and then the Save Sunset Beach Coalition. We had all those bumper stickers, Save Sandy Beach, Save Sunset Beach, and then I still remember the third iteration of the bumper sticker that said, save something, right? And our environmental community has been organized around stopping inappropriate things from being built. And I think we should continue to stop inappropriate things from being built. I also think we need to be able to draw a distinction between that and the stuff we all say we want. We all say we want our kids and grandkids and cousins and coworkers to be able to live here. And we all understand that the average home is whatever it is, 1.2, 1.4, right? And that just doesn't work. We have a housing shortage in the state of Hawaii. 70,000 units short statewide, 5,000 to 6,000 units short on this island. And so being able to draw a distinction between inappropriate and appropriate development is a really key thing. And Chris Todd, your new finance chair for the legislature and from Hawaii Island, and Luke Eveslin, who's from the North Shore of Kauai, both young progressive legislators who also happen to be parents and have a different view about housing. They really do. Because they want more of it, because they see that it is actually a shortage problem. Not just affordable housing, but all kinds of housing. If you're a nurse and a firefighter married, you're not actually going to qualify for the federally subsidized affordable housing. We just need more housing, and I'm really hoping that there's going to be continued bipartisan support for that nationally and locally. Okay, challenges. The solar and wind tax credits have been basically yanked. And that doesn't mean we're not going to continue on our trajectory towards a clean energy future in the state of Hawaii. It does mean that the power purchase agreements that are going to be executed are going to cost more. And so that's a real challenge. And then I'll end with this, this sort of set of challenges, which is the SNAP cuts and the Medicaid cuts. What can we do about it? okay, at the institutional level, I'm working with the hospitals, and I have, now weekly staff meetings with Dr. Green, also Dr. Green, Governor Green, to make sure that we are kind of like, we actually have like it's a map for when the cuts hit, how that's going to impact our institutions. So I kind of divide it into two pieces. One is, how do we make sure our institutions survive, right? Our community hospitals, the HHSC, the clinics, the papalokai, all of that has to just make it for the next 3 years. The other part of this is the human impact of these cuts. And that's an area where the not-for-profit community and associations such as yours can really help. Because understand that the eligibility requirements on Medicaid, normally, like you've got these onerous eligibility requirements, but as long as you're helping someone to navigate their way through it, they'll be eligible. These eligibility requirements are designed to kick people off the rolls. And that is a different matter. So during the Affordable Care Act, there were these things called navigators. They were basically social workers. One of them helped both of my mother and father-in-law. They spoke Cantonese and helped them understand what they were eligible, helped them to sign up. We need a version of that, but like even more aggressive, because we need basically 100% penetration into communities, because if you miss a deadline, you're off. That is how they booked the savings in the Big Beautiful Bill. That is how they realized enough savings for those big tax cuts, is they are assuming that millions and millions of people are going to be kicked off of SNAP and Medicaid, not because they're ineligible, but because they missed a deadline. And so that is something, first of all, obviously, the political thing to say is, we gotta go back and we gotta, change the law. But we're not gonna change the law in time for it to make an impact in the next couple of years. So in the meantime, we have to make sure everybody who is eligible stays eligible. And that is like, excuse my mixed metaphors, that's hand-to-hand combat. That is finding Medicaid eligible people, making them understand how serious this is, helping them with their forms. We're already in the process of contemplating tech platforms that help people to kind of ease it. I will say that in Waimea, the Waimea folks actually have little kiosks in the grocery stores where you can come in and do everything. Eligibility determination, exam by iPad, and then prescriptions and whatever else you need. Right next to the poke stand at Tamura, seriously. And this thing, which is frankly still being contemplated by the Association of Community Health Centers on the continent, has been implemented by Waimea for the last several years. So we can lead here because we care about each other. The one thing that I think, not the one thing, one of the things that I think is so special about Hawaii Island is our ability to rally for each other. And I remember this when there was a government shutdown many, many years ago, and I was able to get like the utility companies, all of them, on the phone and say, hey, you need to hold everybody who's a government worker who's not getting paid in abeyance. And they said, cool, we'll do that. Credit unions likewise, banks likewise. You can't do that, I won't name it. You can't do that in other states because they don't have the ability to just convene people and rally people. We still have that. And so this period of time is going to be rough, but not the roughest that this country or this state has ever faced. So I think partly the algorithm is getting us spun up into a position where we think it's never been this bad and it will never get better. And we have to remember how strong we are, how resilient we are, and how many assets we have. This is not me being naive about what's about to come, but this is an understanding that a lot of other people in other generations have faced tough challenges, and we've just got to push through. So, happy to have questions. Thank you.
Testing.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Senator. My name is Armando Rodriguez. I'm a president of Aloha Latinos, and I'm a coffee farmer. And I just wanted to thank you for the work that you're doing, and I just wanted to see what are your thoughts on what ICE is doing to our community.
First of all, thank you. And I don't have an easy solution, right? I can't get ICE to stop what they're doing. I will tell you that it very much matters how we rally together for our fellow residents on Hawaii Island, peacefully but forcefully, with moral clarity about how we treat each other on Hawaii Island. I think that matters. I think that even those ICE agents who are, some of them already here, but some of them flown in from the continent to stay in a hotel, to go and engage in a so-called law enforcement action, but a lot of it is just simple harassment. And I want to be very clear, I don't want anybody to interfere with any law enforcement action. But I do want them, I want to prick their consciences. I want them to feel uncomfortable with what they are doing. These are mostly young people just trying to have a job, being sent out to do a thing. And I think that the effect that Hawaii has on people is not to be underestimated. And so, I was talking to a guy in Oahu about like, what should we do? And I had just come out of a meeting about, frankly, the defense of Taiwan, of all things. And the strategy for Taiwan, right, if China attacks Taiwan, it's not like they can win a fight, right? Kinetic engagement is the euphemism for a war. But they have a strategy called the porcupine strategy, which is to say, boy, you know, they used to say this about the Pittsburgh Steelers, you might win, you might lose, but you're gonna feel really beat up by the end. And I think we need a porcupine strategy where people from the continent assess, understand Stephen Miller in the White House wants his numbers, right? He wants his deportation numbers, he wants his arrest numbers, and so, you know, Customs and Border Protection, they're trying to generate the data, feeding back to the White House as if we are doing our job in Region 9. And we want them to make the assessment after a couple of runs, this place ain't worth it. It's too far away, there's too little support, stay away, it's a porcupine.
Okay, this question came online. I'm worried that we've stopped progress on fighting climate change. Is there anything that can be done by you or any of us in our community?
Yes, keep making progress on climate change locally. Look, first of all, the fight against climate change is going to be decades long, generationally long, right? The Inflation Reduction Act was the first significant, by far, the biggest action ever taken by any government regarding climate. And I'm very, very proud of that. But if we thought it was just going to be smooth sailing from then on, then we misunderstood the magnitude of the problem, both in terms of like physics, right? But also in terms of economics and politics. Like the other side wins. And when they win, they do the thing they want. And so part of what we have to do is maintain our determination and our hope and our clarity that wind and solar and geothermal, and not here, but elsewhere, nuclear is the future. And that they can buy another 8 years worth of coal-fired power plants, but there's no money in that anymore. And so part of what I want people to understand is this thing is going to be like the stock market, which is to say bad years and good years, but moving in the right direction over a period of time. One particular factoid that I think is worth repeating is that when they gutted the wind and solar tax credits, they did not gut the either the geothermal tax credits or the battery storage tax credits. And for a lot of wind and solar projects, especially on our neighbor islands, that's about 40% of the cost. And so we still have a very, very generous subsidy for the battery piece of our clean energy. So is it worse than 2 years ago? Yes. Is it better than 5 years ago? Yes. And my view is like we just literally don't have a choice about whether or not to give up about climate. We simply must prevail. The question is how much avoided pain can be accomplished, right? At some point, we're going to make this transition to fully clean energy. The faster we do it, the less sort of ecosystem pain and actual pain we will experience.
Aloha, my name is Tina Marie. I'm a resident of Waikoloa Village, And just before I preface my question, I want to let you know that I am a co-chair of the Women's State Democratic Women's Caucus, and I'm also Assistant Secretary of the Hawaii County Committee, so I'm involved in the party. And I say this just to preface that I'm involved doing my work. I am speaking on behalf of myself, but my question is that there is a lot of negative rhetoric about the Democratic Party. Both sides are equal, both sides are the same, and do nothing Democrats. I would like to know what the Democratic Party's plan is to combat all that negative rhetoric so that we can increase our voter turnout in the midterms.
Thank you for that question. Look, I think the Democratic Party should talk less about itself. I don't mean that like as a turn of phrase. Like I actually think one of the problems is that you actually don't hear this level of like internal, what should the Republican Party do? Like they know what they are. They're aligned with Donald John Trump, and that's the end of the story. And it's not interesting, and so it's not talked about. But half of discourse, all of discourse on the right is how terrible the Democrats are. And then half the discourse on the left is how terrible the Democrats are. So I just actually think, and there's one other, no, it might not be one other. But an additional point I kind of want to make is that, the center left spends a lot of time punching the leftists, and the leftists spend a lot of time punching the center left. And it's sort of this endless cycle of like factional dominance. And my view is be a centrist, or be a leftist, or be a progressive, or wherever you want to land, but you don't have to narrate your stuff, right? I am a leftist, not like those centrists. I am a centrist, not like those leftists. Who cares? And the reason that we have disconnected is because people find us to be so self-referential that it seems like the main thing is who's like at the top of this mountain called losing all the time, right? And so, so I really believe that the more we focus on regular people, the better. And I also just think there is a cultural aspect here, which is that even when I was growing up, the sense was, and by the way, I apologize, I'm sure there are Republicans in the room, and I don't mean to assume that this is a Democratic Party committee meeting, right? I'm sure it's a little left of center, but still, I want to respect that people have a variety of views. But I just think that we spend a ton of time using language that actually does exclude people and does make it seem like we're the ones that don't want to have any fun. And I will tell you, and this is tough to take because it was for me kind of tough to watch. Those Trump rallies, people were having, it was joyful, right? They were having a blast. There was community there. And so I actually think one of the things that we need to do is just like loosen up a little bit. And I remember there's a certain ranch down the road that used to have a bunch of Democratic Party events. And it was, Patty's laughing, she knows which ranch. But it used to be food and music and like a real comfort with enjoying like ethnic differences and making fun, but in a very joyful and loving way. And I think at some point we got very uncomfortable embracing our diversity and having a blast. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is kind of loosen up a little bit because some voters, not all of them, but there's some little cohort of voters who decide who to vote for on the basis of would they want to be part of that? Like, would you enjoy a party with 75 people over here or over there? And I think some people like agree with the Democrats, but think the Republicans look like more fun. And that's something we need to work on. But by work on it, I mean don't work on it. Just be more loose.
All right. This is regarding Elon Musk's ability to dump his rocket rubbish in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. How did that happen?
I actually have to check with my staff, but I thought they pulled back on this. I'm looking for a nod. Okay, my staff doesn't actually. Well, the fishing thing, well, recently. Nobody should be allowed to dump any kind of rubbish in the northwest Hawaiian Islands. Not anyone else.
Can I go from there real quick? I'm sorry, I'm going against what I said I was gonna do, but since we're on the, what about the commercial fishing in the National Monument area?
You know, Papahānaumokuakea is one of my most important accomplishments, not my accomplishment, but it's one of the most important things that I have ever been involved in. It was declared I'm sorry, I'm forgetting.
Sanctuary.
Thank you.
Marine
No,
monument.
sorry.
Monument.
So it was originally under the Antiquities Act, it was declared a monument, and then it became a sanctuary. Why does that matter? Because to get sanctuary status, you have to go through a rulemaking process, which is super onerous and long. And once you have sanctuary status, in order to take back sanctuary status, you have to go back through a rulemaking, which would take several years, and you have to have an evidentiary record of some reason to repeal the sanctuary status. So it's not that they wouldn't try to come after Papahānaumokuakea, but it just has sort of belt and suspenders, more legal protections, for instance, at the Pacific Remote Islands Monument, which obviously Judge Micah Smith last week, I think, said that just allowing fishing in Prim was not permissible either, but Papa has extra protection. Again, I'm in politics, so only the paranoid survive, but I do feel like we did everything that we could to protect Papa, and I'm like 70-30 confident there.
Aloha, Senator Schatz. John White, Hamakua Kohala Health Center. We're the federally qualified health center system here in North Hawaii. Welcome. My question is, with your knowledge of HR 1 and the impacts on Medicaid and the opportunities that perhaps rural funding coming to Hawaii represent for us, what's your best advice and the highest value things relative to primary care specifically in that situation? What do we do to make the best of it?
I feel, look, there's this $50 billion fund to make up for about a $1 trillion cut. Should we chase the $50 billion? Yes. And also the way it was written is that there's what they call a small state minimum. So the first half of that $50 billion gets split among all 50 states equally. If you're New York or Texas, you get the same amount as the state of Hawaii. So that's pretty beneficial to us, and Josh Green and others are working on making sure we avail ourselves of that cut. We should do that. But I feel like that the question you're asking is actually beyond my scope, because it is about sort of state health planning and how do you configure a system that makes sense. I am very worried about emergency care. And we talked right before we started about the payer mix, which is at least half. Between Medicaid and Medicare, it's more than half. And that is going to be a significant cut. So institutionally, I'm quite worried about that. And I don't have like a sort of a magic bullet here, other than some of these cuts are far enough in the future that I would not in advance start shutting down. Because they're really 3 years from now, and we don't exactly know how they're going to be implemented. And there are going to be rulemakings and administrative processes and whatever. So I think you have to brace yourself for this fiscal year and the next. But my advice to basically everybody who's facing federal funding cuts is like, don't cut because in 29 or 28 you're going to see a reduction in revenue. That's a political lifetime from now. Deal with the next, whatever, 18 months, 36 months, that's fine, we'll try to help. I'm not supposing it's going to be easy. And then the other thing is, like, if people aren't Medicaid eligible, they're still showing up. And then you've got a bigger percentage of your expenditures as unreimbursed care. So this community effort to make sure everybody stays enrolled in Medicaid it's good for the individuals, but it's also very important for our institutions.
Thank you. This might be kind of tagging on to that, but Senator Hawaii Island Food Basket tells us that about 40% of our families on this island are food insecure. And so school meals are extremely important to our community, both for their health and well-being, but also for their readiness to learn. Could you advise us on how we should be handling that or approaching that?
Well, thank you for the question. I think the first thing is that basically the same playbook for Medicaid eligibility has to be used for SNAP eligibility. And you're gonna have to prove that you're looking for a job or that you are employed and all the rest of it. That part is manageable. And of course, the state government, in a lot of instances, subsidizes or matches the SNAP benefit. Most of the school lunch stuff is still state funding, and it's going to be a challenge because they're now budget constrained. I will say that right now, as it stands, the state budget doesn't look terrible. And so one of the things that I've talked to Josh and local legislative leaders about is I don't expect you to sort of basically swoop in and plug the hole caused by the federal government, but you may want to target some very specific and high impact areas to plug certain holes. It is not fair to state government to go and plug a probably many billion-dollar hole. But if it's 28 million here and 32 million, they actually have the resources for that. So I'm trying to both encourage them to be helpful because they want to, but also manage everyone's expectations. They cannot backfill everything. And so Josh and I, with Sylvia and the speaker and the president and the money chairs, are literally working that list to see what's reasonable and realistic. Because I think one of the most important things for public confidence and a sense that we will get through this is us not kind of chirping at each other and blaming each other and shifting blame. Look, this is a federal failure, right? So here we are. And I will do whatever I can. And for my first 12 and a half years, I basically got to drive around and say, you're welcome, right, for the federal funds. This is the first year it's been really rough, and I am not announcing good news. But I think I've earned enough credibility in terms of the federal funds to work through this process. And I'm trying to make sure that we basically figure out where we're going to be short, see whether state or county government can make up the difference, and then see whether the not-for-profit community can come in behind that. And then if there are no resources after state, county, and not-for-profit community, then we need to look people in the eye and tell them what's actually happening. Because I think the only thing worse than harm happening to a community is people not knowing that it's coming. So as long as we're ready, that's, I think, all we can really promise you.
Hi, I'm a nurse over at North Hawaii here, and we've just been finishing up our new contract negotiations, and we were pleased to get some safe staffing ratios requirements in that. They also got the same one over on Oahu. My question to you is, we've been trying to, the unions, trying to get bills passed through the House, at the state level, to have safe staffing ratios throughout the entire state, and it just always gets shelved. It never goes through. And I'm wondering if you would support that for acute care and for long-term, and what can we do to make this happen? Because there's some pretty dangerous situations out there.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for being a nurse. Thank you for your service. We really appreciate you. But I'm going to be very blunt here. I have weighed, in my 13 years in the Senate, I've weighed in 3 times on issues of the Hawaii legislature. And so I basically try to stay out of their business because that way they take my phone call when I do call. That's not even like a joke. That's literally why I do this. Is so that when I'm calling, it's like, oh, he's going to help me, not like he's going to boss me around. So I will not weigh in on a sort of statutory minimum staffing ratio. In principle, I think that's very important, and I support your right to collectively bargain for it. And I think every hospital administrator should be thinking along those lines. But I can't promise you I'm going to go weigh in at the ledge because I try to make those exceptions very, very rarely.
Aloha, Senator. My name is Doris Siegel Matsunaga, and I'm a proud Waimea resident. And I'm here today representing the North Hawaii Action Network, a chapter of Indivisible Hawaii. And we're the group who in April organized 1,000 people joyfully to line the streets of this small town and protest the cuts, cruelty, and chaos of the Trump administration. And we'll do it again. My question to you, Senator, there is a question here, is the one people are always asking us, which is what more can we do to save democracy and protect Hawaii? Thank you.
First of all, thank you for everything you do, and thank you for caring so much. Look, the government funded my trip, so I won't talk about elections. But obviously there's a piece of this that has to do with midterms and all the rest of it. But setting that aside, I don't mind you calling my office and telling me to do the thing that I'm probably likely to do anyway. But my own judgment, and I've been getting this a lot, like not just in a town hall context, but like wherever I go, what can I be doing? I really just believe to my core that the best thing that we can be doing is taking care of each other. You know, like yelling at the screen, you know, sending $7 to whomever. It's all, you know, I'm not begrudging anybody wanting to do that. I yell at the screen and I send $7. But I just think Hawaii is so special that it is worth protecting in its own right. And that our Republican and conservative brothers and sisters, you know, it's a different kind of Republican and conservative vibe over here. People may want smaller government. People may be more pro-military. People may just have a different view about social issues. But we are not at war with each other. And that, I think, is a really important thing to cultivate in this community. Because as I look at the head, I forgot your first name, but the head of Aloha Latinos. Armando.
Yes.
I just think it's really important for us to continue to be an example of how the United States ought to be. And you know that old John F. Kennedy quote about Hawaii demonstrating to the world what the United States strives to be. That's what you should all be doing. By all means, get involved in national politics. If that scratches an itch you've got, go for it. But I actually think if you really ask me where you can make the most impact, it's like find 10 people to stay enrolled in Medicaid. Find some way to help people to get SNAP benefits. Push more for clean energy. Push more to protect the vulnerable. That's what we should all be doing, and we should be doing it in our own neighborhoods, not on Instagram.
Senator, thank you so much for the courage that you displayed standing up for Trump's big BS bill. We really appreciate all those efforts that you've been displaying in Congress. The question that I have that is causing a lot of uncertainty with our small businesses and people is about tariffs and chaos that is being sown throughout the world with Trump's inconsistent and crazy approach to tariffs. Is there anything that we can do?
I don't think so. So the way this works, right, is that this authority to levy tariffs is the original authority under the Constitution is the legislative branches. But, generations ago, the Congress passed this authority and delegated to the executive branch. And so here we are, and it was always under the assumption that those authorities would be used responsibly. But we are not in a position, like I can tell you, I've got a bill to repeal those authorities, like that's not happening. We would need a veto-proof majority in both chambers to overturn like Donald Trump's signature economic policy, so that we don't have the votes for that. And so my own judgment is, yes, I will speak out about how harmful they are, because it's important for everybody to understand that a tariff is a tax, it's a regressive tax. And that it's not even bringing back manufacturing, it's actually hurting us as we try to bring in. What people don't understand is so much of manufacturing now is assembly. It's inputs, and you need stuff from all over the world, and then you can do your manufacturing. So it's not the 1920s where we're going to make our own steel or anything else like that. So it is a very difficult issue because it is Donald Trump's authority here. Where I focus, because I put that all in a basket called cost of living, and between what you pay at the grocery store or at the Home Depot and what you pay to Hawaiian Electric, or what you pay for rent and housing. I try to focus on the energy space and the housing space, because that's an area where I'm in a position to actually make a difference to people. I can yell about the other stuff, but so long as the House House and Senate are controlled by Republicans, we're going to still, or it could be that Trump eventually just backs off and realizes that the stock market doesn't like this anymore. But until then, we're stuck with these.
I want you to keep yelling.
Okay, well, if I must.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. My name is Ruth Robinson. I live in Hilo, and I would like to acknowledge and respect all the questions that came before mine. I think all of these issues are so important, and I appreciate your responses. Thank you for being a climate champion. I'm a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby, and I'm asking, what can you and what can we do to prevent additional cuts to key NOAA, NASA, and DOE programs related to climate, including the shuttering of Hawaii's iconic Mauna Loa Atmospheric Observatory? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're in the process of fighting up the freezing of funding for the Mauna Loa Observatory. I do not know whether or not we will prevail, but on the overall funding question for NASA, NOAA, the National Weather Service, let me just give you a little bit of good news. The president's budget is not like a mayor's budget or a governor's budget. When the governor submits the budget to the Hawaii legislature, like there are tweaks, but 90-something% of it is enacted as presented by the administration. The president's budget is never enacted in any form or fashion close to as it's presented. It has no force of law. It is literally just a suggestion. So my favorite example, because it's my favorite president, is that President Obama every year, to my dismay, zeroed out the funding for the East-West Center. And every year we said, no, we're going to add back the money. And so we ignore president's budgets all the time. The cuts to NOAA, NASA, National Weather Service were like 57% in the president's budget. In the Senate bill that was passed on a bipartisan basis out of the Appropriations Committee, we had a small increase in NOAA, NASA, and the National Weather Service. Now, we still have to contend with the House, but we are not enacting a 57% cut to these science agencies. If you expect me to solve for illegality, that is too high of a bar for me, right? So all we can do is enact a law, kind of constrain the executive and say you must not, it would be nice if, but you must spend these dollars in this way. And then if they break the law, we have to go to the federal courts and enforce the law. And for all of the sort of catastrophizing about ignoring court orders, we have, and I've been meeting with the folks from Democracy Forward and these other organizations that have been suing in federal court successfully, and they are seeing a really, really high percentage of the time that they win, and that those orders are enforced. And we have seen lots of money released to the state of Hawaii because of those court orders. So all is not lost. It's a very, very scary time, but we still have very strong bipartisan support for the Department of Commerce and all the science agencies that belong to it.
Thank you.
Aloha, Senator Brian. My name is Malia Cole. I'm born and raised in Waimea. As a Hawaiian and as an American, I'm deeply troubled by my hard-earned tax dollars being sent to the foreign apartheid state of Israel for their military weapons and genocide against Palestine. What can you do as our senator to remove Israel's massive influence over our politics and our tax dollars? And can you promise to no longer take APAC money?
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure we're going to totally agree on all of this, but I'll tell you my view. I think Israel as a home for the Jewish people is a principle, is an idea that I believe in very strongly. I think the Netanyahu government has done more to undermine the safety of Israel and Israelis and Jews than any leader of Israel since its founding. And I think a lot of people, regular people out there, have an instinct towards supporting the state of Israel, especially in the wake of the horrific terrorist attack. But the conduct of this war has been absolutely inexcusable. And the weaponization of famine has caused a lot of people who consider themselves supporters of the state of Israel to draw a really firm distinction between the people and their government. And I just want to create a little space here for the fact that a lot of people don't like our government or its actions. And that people are not their government. I did vote for the first time last year and the second time this year to withhold certain arms from the state of Israel. But I will tell you that I think left, right, and center, a lot of people's views on this question are evolving in real time. Because even if you consider yourself, whatever you consider yourself, if you disagree with the founding of the state of Israel, or if you're an Israel hawk, or anywhere in between, or if you had a light opinion about it, it's not something you paid attention to, but you saw the terrorist attack and you said, well, it seems reasonable to go after the bad guys. All of those, that sort of range of views, now everybody's saying, what the hell is this? What's this got to do with keeping Israel and Israelis safe? This is collective punishment, not of Hamas, but of children, of journalists, of social workers and nurses, and doctors and firefighters and regular folks. And so, I don't have an easy solution here. Nobody does. And anybody who said, sort of leans on two-state solution or whatever, look, I'm the author of the Two-State Solution Act. That was always the pathway. But with Netanyahu in charge and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and these people pretty much explicitly saying that they want to occupy Gaza and they want to remove Palestinians and move them somewhere else. Enough is enough.
Aloha, Senator. My name is Sam Bluestone. I grew up in this town. I'm sorry to say this, but I have to prick your conscience. I have to make you a little uncomfortable. As a fellow Jew, I know that the shadow of the Holocaust lives in you. Clearly, you've thought about this a lot. And I'm looking towards the future, 6 months in the future, maybe 1, 2, or 3 months in the future, where if we don't step off of this path of the U.S. providing the guns and money to Israel for them to carry out this genocide, this country and Israel will be looked at just as the ethno-supremacist genocidal state of Germany was looked at in 1946, that's where we're going to be, probably almost definitely within 6 months. And so I'd like to offer a very clear solution and remind you that the money comes through Congress. When this comes to account, there's a decent chance that Congress people will be sent to The Hague. And besides that, we'll lose all of our world, none of that matters. Okay, my question is, will you commit to the solution being an immediate arms embargo to Israel? That's the solution, and you and your colleagues have the power to do so. And if you don't, you're destroying yourselves and our whole country.
I'm not gonna, just so we're clear, because we're a little bit out of time, I'm not gonna kind of disagree with some of the premises in your question. I will answer the question in this way. The statute that operates here is that anytime we do an arms transfer, Congress gets to weigh in about whether or not we should transfer those arms. And the most recent opportunity to vote no on an arms transfer, I voted no. And until and unless the U.S. government's policy changes, and until and unless the state of Israel's policy changes, I intend to continue to vote no on arms transfers to Israel. Not because I disagree with the founding of the state of Israel, but because I disagree with the actions of the Israeli government.
Hello, Senator Schatz. Thank you for holding this meeting. I want you to know that I
I've been very dismayed and horrified by the loss of our democracy under the Trump regime. And every day it seems like another one of our democratic rights has been disintegrated. And I know you don't have much power in Congress right now because of the Republican control over both houses. But can you please tell us what you're doing to try to preserve our democracy? And do you think it has any effect whatsoever on Trump or the Republican Congress that seems to be fine with the dictator as long as they keep their jobs?
Thank you for the question. It's a hard one. We have 2 minutes. I feel like I should just pour myself a beer and stay. The breeze is nice. Look, democracy is not what we have, it's what we do. It is not a spectator sport, it is a participatory thing. And I was actually in the ocean this morning and I got basically the same question. And many apologies, like, I'm sorry, I'm making this into a town hall. I'm like, don't worry, it's like practice. But I will just say this, and this gave me a fair amount of hope. A person I know who studies what they're now calling competitive authoritarianism, which is sort of Erdogan, what's happening in Belarus, all the rest of it. There's now a playbook, and we understand that Trump is following. Here's the actually good news. When Erdogan did what he did, right, eviscerate higher education, take control of media, do a number of the things that Trump is in the process of trying to do, he became more popular. And so this only works if it works politically for him. That is not to say that I'm naive about the damage that will be incurred in the meantime. That is not to say that institutions may not fall. That is not to say that pain will not be felt. But the most essential aspect of democracy is that people are observing this. And let's understand that even in a state as blue as ours, lots of people voted for Donald Trump, and not because they wanted masked agents arresting people at Home Depot. Not because of that. Some of them maybe, but not 30% of the state. Not 30% of the state. They were pissed about any number of things, inflation or COVID or Joe Biden was too old or whatever they were mad about, right? And we have to welcome them back and say, not I told you so, right? But welcome. And allow people to say, well, that's not what I meant, right? I was just pissed about the price of eggs. This is not what I signed up for. And that is happening bit by bit, every day. These policies are more and more unpopular. And most of the political impact is pre-actual impact. In other words, people are mostly just seeing what's happening on the screen and reacting negatively to it. Once the big, beautiful bill starts to be implemented, people are going to feel it in their pocketbooks, in their families, in their communities. And it is going to be a rough time for our country and for our state and for Hawaii County. But we will get through it because we are still in charge of our government. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. Drive safely.
We'll try to get a picture. Kona